Welcome to a special report from the OnlyinMiami show. You can find us at www.onlyinmiamishow.com. For this broadcast and for the duration of the events, we've set up a website, www.venezuela.us. That's www.venezuela.us. That tweet wall will show your tweets, your replies, and our tweets as well to support this discussion. This is the OnlyinMiami show special, hashtag VenezuelaSOS. Freedom is not free. It is the obligation of those of us who are free to speak out when people in other countries are deprived of their basic liberties. In Venezuela today, people are unable to peacefully gather to protest the actions of their government seeking redress. In Venezuela today, people are unable to walk the streets safely. In Venezuela today, people are unable to get the basic supplies of life because their government has squandered a mass of riches equivalent to that of a Saudi prince or beyond. That is why freedom is not free, and that is why we must speak out tonight on this broadcast, because the English language media is unaware of the situation in Venezuela, which I attribute to some very unique factors. There has been significant intimidation of the media in Venezuela recently. CNN was kicked out on Friday before being allowed back in. The Miami Herald's Jim Wiss was kidnapped for 2 days extra legally by the government of Venezuela, only to be later released. These acts of journalism, intimidation, cramped freedom of speech in Venezuela. And in fact, freedom of speech is a figment of the imagination in Venezuela, where the government controls all modes of broadcast. Recently, the government cut off the internet to the western frontier areas, leaving more than 1 million people without communications to the outside world. Nobody really knows what's happening in those areas. Right now, there are student protests in Caracas, very much driven by a almost runaway inflation that I calculate to be at roughly 300% annually, even though it is calculated much lower by official sources. Tonight, we're going to hear from several guests of importance. In no order, you are going to see Alessandra Simeoni, who created the video, The Venezuela Situation in English, which has had over 2.7 million views on YouTube. We will have political consultant JJ Rendon, who was advisor to the last opposition campaign by Capriles in Venezuela. We'll also have Jared Goyette of the Fusion Network. He is their online editor, and we'll be joined by Erwin Arieta Valera. He is the former oil minister of Venezuela, the chief technocrat in the government from 1994 to 1999, who was dismissed by Mr. Hugo Chavez in 1999 and exiled from Venezuela in 2007. This is the OnlyinMiami show, and I'd like to welcome Alessandra. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, tell me a little bit. What inspired you to create the video, The Venezuela Situation, in English?
First of all, hello to everyone who is seeing me. For the first reason, I did it without knowing that it was going to be so viral, my video. But I did it because I still have family there and I care about them. And I did it with my friend in Gainesville. She's the narrator of the video. And we are here outside. And since we don't have freedom of speech in Venezuela, we decided to make that video for the English speakers who don't know what is going on in our country.
Tell me a little bit about life in Venezuela. Was it difficult to find basic supplies like flour, sugar, anything else?
Well, when I used to live in Venezuela, it was difficult to find the basic needs, but not as right now, because I moved here 3 years ago, And in that time, I could find, I mean, toilet paper and flour and stuff like that. But as right now, it's impossible to find stuff, and it's worse. Every day, it's getting worse and worse.
So you attended college in Venezuela before you came here. Where are you attending school now?
Right now, I'm in Nova Southeastern University, and in Venezuela, I study in Monte Avila University.
So what are the big differences between the United States and Venezuela when it comes to your basic personal safety?
Well, when I was living in Venezuela, I used to be afraid of driving to the university because I was in my car, afraid of someone stealing my phone or getting kidnapped. And here the difference is like I'm free. I can drive my car without being scared. I can use my phone during traffic, and that's the difference in my daily life.
Now, Venezuela is known for having a black market for currency. Did your family use the black market for currency?
Well, my family did use the black market because it was impossible. We have Kadivi, and of course
What's
they
Kadivi? Explain to me that.
Kadivi is something that the government created to shut down the dollars that we buy. So, for example, in the normal market, you can access, for example, if you want to travel to a place, you can have like the minimum amount of dollars. So people have to use the black market to access to more dollars because it's impossible to be in vacation just with, I don't know, $600.
Okay, so tell me this. Um, when you're in Venezuela, why is the media not reporting on the story there?
Can you repeat the question?
Like, why is Venezuelan media not reporting on student protests and anything else that's going on in the country?
Well, our TV stations, radios, and newspapers has been taken by the government because they don't want to show the world what is going on in Venezuela. As an example, I can say I was doing the video, and my cousin who still lives there, she showed me a picture of what was going on while the while the protesting were going on. They were showing Flipper, the movie Flipper. So is that normal in a country to happen? Like, while people are dying on the street, they are showing Flipper. So I don't know what they just don't want to show the world what is going on. They want to shut down the voice. That's why I'm here, and I want to show the world what is going on.
Well, we appreciate you coming out here, and we appreciate you making the video that over 2 million people have seen on YouTube to date. So tell me a little bit about, coming from there to here, what would you say is the biggest change for you as far as just day-to-day life between Venezuela and here?
My biggest change, it was leaving my family there because I don't know, Venezuelan culture, we are very huggy, and I miss that part of my country. That's the most difficult thing. I mean, I'm here with my families. Some of my friends are here without their family, and that's what we miss the most. Our people, our hugs, our yes.
I understand. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, just scoot over for a second. We're going to have some more guests come in, all right? I'd like to welcome Jared Goyette to the show. Let's see if the mic works this time.
How we doing?
I think we're good. So, Jared, you're the online editor of Fusion TV.
Well, I'm one of a few online editors. There's Miranda Grossman, there's Arieta. Yeah, we've been covering the Venezuelan protests since they've started. We have over the last week we've had a correspondent in Caracas doing regular updates, often live, either for us or for ABC. And it's it was a situation where we had the opportunity to get people on the ground quickly. We have a bureau in Caracas, and we felt that we had, as a media organization, a chance to cover this story in a unique way, and we've been trying to do that.
So your website is fusion.net, correct?
Correct.
And what will we find there as far as stories on Venezuela today?
Well, as starting tomorrow, actually, starting tomorrow, we're going to be doing daily video updates embedded with the protest movement. We're just working on that before I came here, and tomorrow morning, you're going to see the first of a series of those. We also see the regular updates that Mariana Atencio has done, as well as continuous streams of op-eds from different sides of the spectrum.
So with these op-eds, are we talking about both sides of the story? Are we getting opinions from the government side as well as the protest side?
No, I think so far we've been covering the protests, and I think that we need, there's a challenge of getting. Honestly, I think that's part of the reason why media organizations have somewhat shied away from the story, because it's a difficult it's a difficult story to tell as far as understanding both sides and portraying it fairly. We've been so far I would describe our coverage as more raw and immediate, and as we delve deeper into it, we'll be able to contextualize more.
So how many reporters do you have on site right now? Are they like just freelance, or are they Fusion's reporters? Do you guys have your guys down there?
We've had the Mariana Atencio there as she's Fusion staff until last week, and then we're building out a network of correspondents. Like I said,
Well, I know you guys are a fairly new network, as news organizations go, maybe a year and a half old now.
Yeah, and as a editorial operation, I think we launched on October 28th. So we are fairly new, but this is an issue we've paid attention to, and I think you can see that in the output of stories we've done and will do.
So you've been following all of the news coverage extremely closely. From what you've seen, do you believe that the freedom of speech for regular Venezuelans is being curtailed at this moment?
I think in cases there's a lot going on here. I mean, the short answer to that is no. I mean, I think you have both the intimidation of media, which I think which Mariana Atencio has done a documentary on, as far as how the government has pressured and bought out Global Vision, which took out a dissident voice. You've also had a somewhat murky relationship between the official forces and these paramilitary-like groups, which have been responsible, allegedly, for some of the intimidation that has occurred of protesters and some of the violence.
So these paramilitary groups, they are actually, they're not military, they're not affiliated with the government, but you're talking about the groups that are Chavez supporters. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm talking about the groups that were modeled after this militia in Iran, and I think that's another aspect of the story that's sort of murky and difficult to tell well, and I think that's part of the reason why media has kind of stayed away from it, because it's not clear cut. The lines are hard to define, and I think journalists need to do a better job of explaining exactly how these group works and what their role is.
Well, I theorize that there's what I call a double language barrier at play. Not just the language barrier between English and Spanish, but also the language barrier between Venezuelan Spanish and, let's say, more standard dialects like Colombian Spanish. The Venezuelan Spanish is very idiomatic. There's a lot of slang. There's a lot of words that don't appear in other Spanish dictionaries. Can you elaborate on the quirks and uniqueness of Venezuelan Spanish versus, other countries?
I think maybe I would need to pass the mic on that one.
Yeah, you can do that, actually.
Well, the thing is that we have a lot of idioms, as you were saying. I don't know, our language is unique. We use a lot of words that, for example, Colombians or Argentines, they don't understand. So I think, yes, it's difficult sometimes for the media when we are speaking out loud to understand everything that we are saying. There's
a lot of sayings, you hear a lot of, Well, this doesn't really translate well.
Yes, when I was making the video, I was trying to translate everything and making another one that I'm going to, and I was translating what they were saying, and I was like, how can I say that in English? How can I make people in English understand what they are really saying? And that's the difficult part.
No, I understand. I'm an English and Spanish speaker and reader, but you know, occasionally, like when I need to do it quickly, I'll try to use Google Translate. And what I found is that Google Translate does not understand Venezuelan Spanish.
At all.
No,
Yes, I agree.
yeah, and I think it leads to a much more difficult story to be reported, even by Miami Spanish language media.
Yes, it is.
So,
I mean, I don't think that is the every country has its, as you sort of dig deeper, and if you're not talking to government officials, but talking to people on the street, you're going to get a more a more local dialect and
street, but I'm saying the written language as well is much more idiomatic. Like there's a lot more.
But
I think the turns of phrase are not like Colombian Spanish is considered like Midwestern English. It's like a very vanilla standard dialect.
I think
more like a teaching dialect.
I think a bigger issue at play here is that this is a new situation that people are used to looking at through old lenses, and or they're just staying away from it altogether. Like, is this part of the old left-right sort of analysis of Chavez, where there's the supporters and defenders, or is this something entirely new? And I think those sort of political questions are more part of the reason why the media hasn't paid as much attention to it. At the same time, Ukraine was happening, and that was a very visual, dramatic story. I wouldn't be surprised that if Venezuela starts to creep up in the news now more, that there's been a deal in the Ukraine. Those things shouldn't be related, but I would expect in the next week or so that it's going to start to become a bigger news story.
Alrighty, thank you, and thank both of you. I'm going to ask Alyssa to just step aside for a moment. We're going to have Erwin Arieta Valera on in a moment here. Erwin was the oil minister from 1994 to 1999, and he was appointed by the president before Hugo Chavez, served under Chavez until 1999, whereupon he was dismissed, and then was kicked out of the country in 2007. Erwin, can you hear me?
Yes. How are you?
I'm well, Erwin. Thank you for joining us on the show tonight. So, Erwin, please tell me, what was it like serving under Hugo Chavez in the early days in Venezuela?
Well, thank you very much for your kindness of inviting me to the program. And I didn't serve to Mr. Chavez because I left when he took over.
Hey!
When he left the power, the government in my country. So I was the minister of President Valera during 5 years. But when his post ended, Chavez took some names and new cabinet and new ministers in the government started. So actually, I wasn't working 1 second. Thanks God to Mr. Chavez.
So, why did Hugo Chavez decide to kick you out of Venezuela?
No, I decided to leave Venezuela. I left my post. I finished my post in 1999. And then I left Venezuela in 2007. The reason was because while he was running as a candidate for the presidency, and I had to implement my energy policy in my country as a minister that I call the oil opening. The oil opening was to allow to invite the private investors in the oil business, which was not against the nationalization. It was a real nationalization, because what they had called before nationalization was what I say stratification, was the state to control the activity. Nationalization by inviting the privates was not only violence. And that was what Juan Jose, and he considered that a traitor of the nation because inviting the transnational traditional oil companies, they considered that was a traitor of the nation. And on the contrary, the oil opening, I copied that subsection policy from China. China, despite of being communist, China opened from the capital, the private capital, to the energy field. And that was great. And they were successful as far as the oil industry was concerned, being communist. So I said, we're not going to invite any new policy. That is good. And actually, it got success at that time.
Mr. Arieta, Jared Goyette has a question for you.
Hi, Mr. Arieta. So I was curious, how do you see, you saw when you were in Venezuela, Chavismo was at a different stage. Obviously, Chavez was still around. How do you see it as different now? And how do you understand the interplay within Chavismo itself? Do you see it as still united, or is more of a question of different power players all operating at once? We can go into more details, but I'm just, in general, how do you see Chavismo as different now than it was when you were in Venezuela?
Well, to me, the problem of Chavez is not the doctrine, it's not the ideology, the philosophy. The problem of Chavez is that he's a poor ignorant. As simple as that, I'm not defending him. He's an ignorant. He doesn't know even how to speak Spanish in a proper way. So it was an accident when he wanted to become to take the President Perez, the past, being elected by our law. So it doesn't have any philosophy. Chavez just came and appeared in a scenario, and no ideology, no philosophy. So finally he, as you know, died after trying to what he called the happiness to the country, the system from Cuba, because it became too close to Cuba and it was demonstrating. Actually, the real process of Chavez was not the Congress, the parliament, as a democracy, the nation. It was capital communism. So he didn't have any idea regarding any knowledge regarding administration, the government, and that was happening now. Even the president, the actual president, is even worse as far as knowledge and capability than Chavez.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Valera.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I hope you feel better. I appreciate you coming on the show today. So we have a audio report from a telephone call that we collected yesterday from one of Voxy.com's reporters, George Solis. Voxy.com is based in Coral Gables, and it is an English language station reporting on news for the Latin American market. Voxy.com reported on the death of Genesis Carmona, Miss Turismo, or Miss Tourism Venezuela, which occurred on Wednesday of this week. She was killed at one of the protests when she was struck by a bullet in the head. George Solis is reporting from 3 hours outside of Caracas. He is actually the sports correspondent for Voxy.com. However, his experiences represent what a normal expatriate or somebody living outside of Caracas might expect. His interview contains very revealing facts about the black market in Venezuela.
So, what's the current situation in your location? Are you having difficulty obtaining basic commodities like food, other staples?
Right. Well, I actually live right above. My landlords are shop owners, and we all have been through this problem for quite a long time now. I would say at least a year or more, in terms of not being able to find the basic commodities. And sometimes they're suddenly available, like toilet paper is now suddenly very available. But a few months ago, nobody could find toilet paper anywhere.
Now, are typical Venezuelans afraid to be in the streets in the area that you're at right now?
Absolutely not. So where I am right now is sort of an anomalous situation in the sense that it's very peaceful. I'm not close to the university, but a couple of days ago, and I reported on this for Voxy, there was a fight broke out between supporters of the government and the students there who were anti-government, and somebody was killed, and the student was killed and was thrown out of a third-story window. So there is the possibility always of violence lurking around the corner here. But I have not been privy to it yet.
Typical Venezuelans who don't have access to dollars are experiencing a serious loss of erosion of purchasing power. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Well, for example, my wife is a medical doctor. She makes $10,000 to $15,000 a month as a doctor at the hospital. And if she were alone, it would be very difficult for her to survive. Fortunately, she had me. It was turning in dollars, and so we're doing something.
In your area, do you feel the presence of the Cuban government via doctors or troops or any other influence?
Absolutely not. I think it's an overriding concern in the United States, and it's not so much so here, or rather it's an interest in any sort of Cuban affairs. But I must say that we do have a clinic here, a block away from my house, where I would say maybe half of the medical personnel there is Cuban. And so now it's become sort of like natural, normal to be attended by a Cuban doctor.
Do you concern yourself that the government is screening your written messages, such as emails and text messages?
It is a possible concern, but I don't feel paranoid about it right this second. And that's until there's somebody from the government or the secret police calls me up and says, well, we need to talk to you.
You mentioned secret police. Can you tell me a little bit about the Venezuelan secret police and who they are and what they do?
They're a fearful group of people like secret police in any country. They've been known to torture, and basically they try to keep tabs on people that might be a threat to the government. That's pretty obvious. And
are they prevalent in your small town?
Not that I know of at all. In fact, in this town, the police are not a very forceful presence at all, and they certainly don't try to stop ordinary citizens like myself. There was a problem to try to underscore or paint a picture of what's going on here. Yesterday, my wife, the doctor, was coming back up from Caracas to El Atillo, which is a suburb of Caracas, and she was met, as she was coming into the town, she was met by students with rocks in their hands, and who said that she couldn't pass. And she said, well, I'm going to pass. And she's rather a forthright person, and she was able to make it home. But we had like two different conversations, one very nervous, and the second one quite relieved.
Welcome back. This is the Only in Miami show, and I'm your host, Grant Stern. Today, there have been two statements issued by both the United States State Department and the Venezuelan government. Had issued a statement on Friday by Danny Glover, the actor well known from the Lethal Weapon movies. Danny Glover has been a supporter of the Venezuelan regime for many years. He took $18 million from Hugo Chavez to produce a film about Toussaint Louverture in Haiti. The statement from the U.S. Department of State, released on February 15th by John Kerry, reads, "The United States is deeply concerned by rising tensions and violence surrounding this week's protests in Venezuela. Our condolences go to the families of those killed as a result of this tragic violence. We are particularly alarmed by the reports that the Venezuelan government has arrested or detained scores of anti-government protesters and issued an arrest warrant for opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez, who, I might interject, surrendered recently. We join the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Secretary General for the OAS, EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, and others in condemning this senseless violence. We call on the Venezuelan government to provide the political space necessary for meaningful dialogue with the Venezuelan people and to release detained protesters. We urge all parties to work to restore calm and refrain from violence. Freedoms of expression and peaceful assembly are universal human rights. They are essential to a functioning democracy, and the Venezuelan government has an obligation to protect these fundamental freedoms and the safety of its citizens. Now, Mr. Glover's statement is a little bit different. This statement was issued directly to me by his publicist. We did request that Mr. Glover personally appear on this show via remote or telephone call. However, he was personally unavailable and filming on location. This statement was released through the official website of the Venezuelan government in the United States, their embassy. A call to Americans to support nonviolence and democratic institutions in Venezuela from Danny Glover. Quote, returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of Martin Luther King. As a citizen artist, I have always assumed responsibility to take public positions on difficult and controversial domestic and foreign affairs issues that challenge honest people of principle to find positive negotiations to justly resolve passionately held opposing positions. In this context, I urge my fellow citizens to join me in calling for a stop to the violence now perpetuated by some disgruntled sectors of Venezuelan society and foreign supporters. I firmly believe that honest and passionate debate is indispensable to progressive participatory democracy. Please take a stand and communicate with your networks, the media, and the U.S. State Department. Resorting to indiscriminate violence inflames passions to the point of incivility and assaults the highly acclaimed, transparent, fair, and democratic process that Venezuela has been perfecting for a decade. Neither Venezuelans nor foreign governments or citizens should attempt to supplant through violence or manipulation the electoral will of the Venezuelan majority. I urge citizens of the United States government to stand with the 33 countries of the Community of Latin America and Caribbean nations in their support of the Venezuelan government and the constitutional democratic measures by which they manage the self-determination of their country. As citizens of the Americas, we and our government should support the recent resolution of Latin America and the Caribbean to be a region of peace and non-interference in sovereign affairs. Join me and millions of others inside Venezuela, across Latin America and the Caribbean, and around the world to call upon the perpetrators and supporters of public violence against the elected Venezuelan government to cease and desist with violence and all non-electoral means to overrule the majority electoral voices of the Venezuelan people. I mean to point out that this is a very ironic statement, and to call Venezuelan elections highly acclaimed, transparent, and a fair democratic process, I believe tells you the tenor of this statement. Joining us this evening is JJ Rendon. JJ Rendon was political consultant to the Capriles campaign, the last opposition campaign to Nicolas Maduro, the current president of Venezuela and perpetrator of this crackdown on the student uprisings today. JJ, thank you for having us on the show. Thank you for being on the show. Go ahead. So, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your involvement in Latin American politics in general.
Yeah, I'm working as a political strategist for the last almost 30 years. I run campaigns all over from Mexico to the Rio Bravo to the Patagonia. I've been working in like 30 presidential races. We won 26, we lost 3, and we got stolen 1.
And which one was stolen?
I believe the Capriles one we won, and the system denied us to have a recall or a review of the election. And nothing. And besides that, my job, I'm a strong activist with the opposition. And what I mean opposition, I mean not partisan opposition. I mean the Capriles situation of those 4 months was another way to add in my position of helping Venezuela. But anyway, I'm doing this for the last 14 years, and I have been very blamed and prosecuted by the government that and so deeply that I don't have even nationality or passport right now.
Well, you're originally from Venezuela.
I'm originally from Venezuela, and a legitimate president, Nicolas Maduro, denies, nullify my passport and declares me countryless. So I'm countryless right now because he says so.
So you're a man without a country right now.
Right now, yes.
Now,
I have it in my heart, but I mean, I don't have the papers.
you don't have the papers.
No.
When was the last time you were allowed in Venezuela?
2004.
And where have you been since then?
I was working and traveling all over, but I was fighting the same forces in every country. We fight against their supporters and their partners in Mexico. We did that the same in Argentina. We're helping the opposition all over. And our fight with Maduro became noticeable with the presidential election, but when he was foreign affairs minister, we were having encounters on side by side. He delivering money from the regime, having an intervention in other countries' electoral processes, and myself and my team working to help other countries who don't get into the same situation of Venezuela, to stop the spreading of this disease.
Now, one of the things that we've spoken about is inflation.
Yeah.
What would you say the effect of inflation is in Venezuela today on these protests?
And the main thing about inflation and other problems is this is an organic situation. When we say the government is being put against the ropes by the opposition, in reality, if you check the polls today, 87% of the population, of the Venezuelan population, is against the government right now. So Danny Glover can say that Maduro won the election, whatever. I think he stole the election. But let's suppose for a second that he won the election for like 1 point.
Sure.
Okay,
let's suppose that it was a fair and free election.
Okay, so that means that.
And by the way, they stopped the recount of this election, did they not?
Yeah, they promised it, and they stopped it later because if they open the boxes to count the votes.
And what was the margin of victory for the Maduro campaign?
1 point.
1%. So
1%. Less than 100,000 votes. 124,000.
In a country of 25 million people.
27, 26, let's say. But anyway, I was trying to make a point. 87% doesn't include the partisan opposition. It includes people that were supporting Chavez before Maduro arrives. So we are seeing more and more every day people in the street fighting against that. So when Danny Glover said we need to respect, or Venezuela need to respect the voting, that was last year, my friend, in April. After that, all the policies of the government were wrong and wrong and wrong, and people are done with this kind of ruling, the way of ruling. So it's not about elections anymore. It's about how is the country. You know that we have 25,000 people got killed last year. So
25,000 people in a country
000.
of 25 million.
Yeah, and we have 250,000 in the last 14 years. So almost 15.
Well, I've heard that 90% of murders in Venezuela go uninvestigated.
99%. 99%. Not all. They don't go to trial. No, not under even investigation.
Right. Well, I think it points out the absurdity of the official numbers that 5 protesters have been killed in this violence
have 10 already.
When 60 to 70 people are murdered every single day in Venezuela, and many of them for political reasons.
Some weekends we have like over 100 just in the capital city, Caracas. So if you put that, the entire production of the food and the chain of supplies is done. You don't find even toilet paper. Add to that the inflation, the devaluation of the currency, and then
well, I'll tell you that as I used to know it, the black market in Venezuela existed to buy dollars for twice the official exchange rate.
Yeah, now it's 10 times.
Well, George just reported a few minutes ago it's 12 times.
Yeah,
and he said that every single time it keeps increasing.
Yeah.
Well, at 12 times over the last 2 years, if it's going from 2 times to 12 times, that's 600% inflation over the course of the last 2 years.
Yeah, and as dictators do, they think that controlling prices will solve the thing, or controlling the sale of the currency will solve the thing, and that only increases to the black market and also to the black market of goods, because if you don't let the people recover with the profit to increase their business and put goods again on the chain of distribution, what is going to happen? That people will keep their production and then sell it when it's convenient. That's the market, how the market's rules.
Well, also they keep spending as fast as possible.
Uncorrupted.
Because if you don't spend the money today, it's worth literally less money tomorrow.
Yeah.
And 300%, that means that in a day your money is worth 1% less the following day.
So we are into hyperinflation.
Right, but in a month
right
you lose 30%.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of purchasing
unstoppable.
power.
And that's not Capriles or Leopoldo Lopez or Maria Corina Machado's fault. That's not the United States.
That has nothing to do with an
It has to
election.
do with the way you are trying to solve a crisis, that you are increases the crisis, and when the people get done with something, they are done.
Well, to me, the elephant in the room is the man who's not here today, Hugo Chavez. He's the one that set these policies. Can you tell us a little bit about the effect that his policies of expropriation are having on the Venezuelan economy and how that relates to these uprisings?
Yeah, the government of Venezuela didn't respect any kind of private property, and during the last 14 years, they stole property from companies. And you cannot believe how that destroyed the infrastructure of our production. So at the end of the day, we don't have today, we have less, because the company they took over, they closed it down because they cannot rule it too. They cannot manage those companies. So that the corruption, that is the biggest, considered by a lot of different measures, the biggest one in one of the three biggest one in the planet, and the lack of understanding how to rule. So at the end of the day, these guys were the inefficient guys that Chavez were complaining during the last 14 years. So we are being ruled for the worst of the Chavez group.
Well, most dictators do not like to have opposition even inside their camp. And, that's probably one of the reasons why we're, in an era where you have a bus driver as the president of Venezuela.
I don't mind having a bus driver as president if the person gets ready to rule, really. I don't mind having a person with no studies if he has a good heart and know how to rule and surround himself with good people that can do it. I'm not judgmental about where he come from, because I come from a poor neighborhood, a regular, normal income family, and you can succeed, even coming from that part of a society. But it's so irresponsible to take a position and step forward to rule a country without knowing how to do it. And right now, the world is looking at them, and it's incredible that Danny Glover again talked about the international intervention in Venezuela, when in reality, human rights are not just for Venezuelans. They are being called human rights because they are human. So if you break the Bill of Human Rights in Venezuela, everyone will look at you. And you cannot, because you close the media, stop the social media to let the planet and everyone knows about.
Well, that's a big part of what's going on there. They're cutting off the internet for the western frontier. Can you tell me a little bit about the western side of Venezuela and why that's strategically important? That's at the border with Colombia.
Yeah, because we have there Venezuelan Colombians, like 2.5 million people that cross the border regularly, and they have both nationalities. And we receive goods from Colombia, and we deliver them sometimes with contraband about the frontier. But that's an open hole for the regime. The front of Venezuela is water. The other side is the Amazonia. So the only part that we can receive or help or logistic from Venezuelans from the other side.
From Colombia.
But they are also Venezuelans, so they say Colombians. No, they are binational reality in that part.
Right. Well, I've heard that many of the leftist guerrillas that were Colombian entered Venezuela, but there's also a lot of talk about Cuba's influence in Venezuela. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the possible outside influences?
In reality, the United States, Cuba, and Russia signed an agreement in 1957 It was a non-intervention agreement, and with the presence of Cuban armed forces in Venezuela controlling our armed forces, they broke that agreement. So we already have presence of foreign military in our country, and those are Cuban.
So, is there another foreign presence? Is there any foreign presence really helping the students
No.
in Venezuela?
No, and what you see that looks in some way disorganized, messy, or chaotic is the result of people doing things organically. There is no CIA or government or any group, even a partisan group, even me, no one behind this. It's like the natural reaction from people to a messy government that is ruining the country and killing people.
Well, I think that's the most important point, that this is not a revolution about politics,
No.
even though the regime tends to cast it as a revolution about politics and saying that this is, Director Oliver Stone, he's another United States-based, Hollywood-based director who saddled up to the regime. He said that the people that are protesting today are sore losers.
But at least they are not in the payroll of the government. I mean, because it's so easy to say that if you got checks from the government. I say it so many times, and I got approached by them several times. Why you don't work for us? I say there is no money on the planet that can make me have a coffee to advise you in any of these policies that destroy my country. So it's so easy to live in LA, receive a check, and by the way, Danny Glover with those 18 million that he received, he didn't deliver one piece of the film that he's supposed to yet. So we don't know where the money comes from. We don't have accountability in Venezuela. The president can't give money away, and there is no control of that. We don't know where our gold reserves are. Can you imagine that? So if you see the cartels of the Supreme Court, it's just a facade of the Supreme Court. We don't have no one there that really control the other power.
Right. There's a National Assembly in Venezuela. What power does it have?
Nothing. They receive orders. They receive orders. And when we don't have that. So
we're talking about a country.
I put a name of that. My name is almost over. I was so creative doing that name, because you want to put a name. So you say it's not dictatorship because we don't have military on the street. That was a month ago.
Okay.
And I want to put a name. It's called neo-totalitarianism. So I went to the UN.
Neo-totalitarianism.
Yes, conference, and I explained that to the Americans and other public. Oops, my name is almost over, because when you do the neo-totalitarianism, you don't have institutions, you don't respect, you rule, you run a lot
You're
of
talking
elections.
about that's one of the things that makes the United States
legitimacy.
unique, that you have the rule of law.
Yes.
But in Venezuela right now, it's the rule of man.
We cannot talk about neo-totalitarianism. Maybe in other countries that are spreading the version 1.0 of the model. But right now, I think they are moving very fast to be called a dictatorship and a genocide.
Well, we've talked about the lack of personal security in Venezuela, the murders, the protesters being shot, beaten, and this is on YouTube.
Shot on the back while running unarmed. I mean, how you can call that?
Well, I wanted to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
Are you concerned for your personal security living here in Miami?
Yes.
And why?
Because you have here against the Cubans G2 intelligence people following them, but especially with us. In our case, I know that there is people coming here to the United States to check in every opposition leader that already flee, have political asylum, or is displaced to the United States right now. Because in reality, all the people that are outside of Venezuela, we are still feeling our country and trying to help our fellows Venezuelans there. So in a way, they will try to stop us, even preparing like cases against us in U.S. soil. They will try to do that. Or if someone is requesting political asylum, they delay it or try to see how they can deny it. Especially because we don't have the regular relationship between Venezuela and the United States. So imagine about taxes, for example.
You can't do it, right?
Not people are paying taxes here.
Okay, sure.
Can they collect? Not now, but they will try. Yes. Imagine the best part just about the Venezuelan money that came here, that's paying taxes here, that is not declared there. And so
Well,
on.
I think everybody in South Florida is aware of the result of the embassy closing or the consulate closing in Miami, that Venezuelan expatriates are not able to vote anymore either.
My case is worse. I have a case in Venezuela they opened against me last year. I need to give up a power of attorney to have a little defense there.
So
I cannot
wait,
go to the embassy.
They have charged you in absentia.
Yeah.
In Venezuela.
Yes, for something that supposedly happened in Panama, case that they made, paying someone to go to the police and say that, and that case was dropped. It's proven that it's dropped. But to stop the case in Venezuela and the request for the Interpol that they did, that it doesn't exist, I need to give a power of attorney to someone that I cannot do because that guy is supposed to be approved in an embassy that I cannot step in the embassy because I was declared
Persona non
countryless.
grata.
No,
Right.
worse than that. I don't have. I countryless.
Wow.
So thank
JJ,
you for having me.
thank
here in
you
your program,
very much for
Grant.
joining us.
Thank you for helping,
And
at least raising awareness.
I think it's very important to raise awareness. And for those of you at home, you can follow JJ on Twitter at JJ Rendon, JJRENDON. Now, we're going to take a short break, and I'm going to play for you an audio clip. This is an interview with Andrew Rosati. He is an independent journalist, and he's located in Caracas, Venezuela right now. We taped an interview last night, and this is a short excerpt. And there will be a long version of this and George Solis's interview as well. Andrew Rosati can be found on Twitter at Andrew Rosati, his name. He's also published with the Miami Herald and for multiple news organizations. Can we play the audio?
Tell me a little bit about the current situation in the capital of Venezuela tonight.
It's calmed down a lot in the capital. I mean, there's been a protest today after a massive march that was held by the opposition, protesting the jailing of a opposition leader, Leopoldo Lopez. Tens of thousands of people marched through the city today, demanding his release and to protect their constitutional right to protest.
What would you say the effect of inflation and economic troubles is having on the region today?
I mean, it's a major driver of these protests. People constantly cite that some of the reasons they're taking the street. There's over 56% inflation here, and there's a lot of shortage of basic goods, milk, sugar, and even toilet paper. And it's really, besides an annoyance in everyday life, like I said, it's fueling one of the reasons people are coming out to these streets.
Have you experienced a blackout of the internet or loss of social media services during these uprisings?
No, I have not. The reports that have happening, I can't tell if that was just because the heightened traffic in these days, and where the internet has been seriously blocked, or in the western border region near Colombia, in Patio. In the capital, Caracas, I have not encountered that problem.
Is the Venezuelan government sending in troops to break up protests at this time?
In the capital, it's mainly the city police and the National Guard that are trying to defuse the situation with the protesters. However, in the western state of Patio, which I mentioned before, where the internet was blacked out, or reports that were happening, the government has sent in a battalion of paratroopers to help contain the protests.
We're back live. This is the Only in Miami show. My name is Grant Stern. I'm your host. This is JJ Rendon, and we've got Jared Goyette here from Fusion. Jared, you've got a question for JJ.
Yeah, I want to start with something really basic. I mean, in your mind, what is it that we need to be discussing right now? I mean, there's so many issues, so many side parallel things. What do you think is most important?
For the American public, you say, or this program?
Let's say for the American public.
Okay. First of all, the spreading of a failed model that I was trying to explain, the neo-totalitarianism that is a new way to destroy democracies without looking as a dictatorship. If you want to look at that, you can check it on TED, Mid-Atlantic TEDx, or TED UN, and there is a conference there, 5 minutes, it's very easy, about neo-totalitarianism. Second, this became a dictatorship. And the disrupt attack on human rights. So it's about human rights right now, and not about electoral or respect of the regime or opposition on partisan things. In reality, we have the people rioting or protesting because they're done with the government, and that's a right. To protest is a right. Free speech is a right. That okay, all the countries sometimes step over them, even in the United States. Yes, but no one can tell me that there is no accountability here for people who step forward and racial profiling people, and you see it on TV, and they go to jail, my friend. We didn't have any investigation open to the last 10 kids who were killed. We didn't have any going to jail for torturing. And there is not even an open investigation or recognition from the government.
And that's why protest is the right reason.
Factions fighting, we don't have that anymore. So if we have to raise the attention on something, is the rights of human rights being violated in Venezuela, the regime taking the mask and becoming more and more totalitarianistic in Venezuela, and the need from all us to at least, in a plural way, I don't mind that, because the Danny Glover statement is not a neutral statement. It's someone that is on a payroll. But I don't mind any position, but just look at Venezuela right now, because things are happening very fast.
A question related to not as important, but it's still a reality, the political situation is, to what degree has this opposition, has the protest movement managed to stretch beyond what is normally associated with middle class students? To what degree has it been able to broaden its base, and how do you see that playing out, and what is the importance of it?
The protest of yesterday, if you see it, is the biggest one in the last maybe 14 years. The manifestation of the Venezuelans all over the planet was the biggest one ever. If you hear the silo channels, and I recognize very well accents for different classes, you hear that there is everyone there. So I think that saying that is very, very superficial. Maybe when you see the streets, yes, the protests are more likely to happen in the side that the middle class lives, because there they have a little guarantee that worse things will not happen, because those counties are controlled by the opposition. If you do that on the other side, it will be impossible to have a peaceful protest. And I think that people will go out soon. If you see, there is a video yesterday of a mother of a kid who was killed, and she was very specific. I'm not oligarch, I'm not middle class, I'm not rich. My kid got killed. I want an answer for you. My people in my neighborhood are claiming for answers, and don't give me the U.S. imperialistic fascist thing anymore, please. Assume responsibility. Was very strong message for this mother yesterday.
One more question, which is, it's hard for regular readers, not alone journalists, to understand what political process might play out. So tell me, like, in your mind, what is your ideal scenario? Like, how does this result in a...
Yeah, remember that I'm also an activist. I'm not in a paid role, but I'm playing a role. Okay. So I will not say, because they hear also what we say we are all intervene in our phones, websites. The government have intelligence following what we're doing. So I will not, not answer your question perfectly, but I can say that whatever is going to happen, it will happen inside the Constitution, peacefully, and hopefully we will not get back. We will not get tired, and maybe we will admin our energy to don't make the same mistakes that some, let's say, extremists made on April 2012. There was a coup attempt. I'm not agreeing with that. A total stop of the country, a shoot down the country. I'm not agreeing with that. So we can protest harming the country the less possible. I don't know. I cannot.
Well, there's a meeting supposedly scheduled between former candidate Capriles, who is still an active governor, state governor of Miranda, I believe. And there's a meeting between he and Maduro. Do you think that any of these purported talks and peace conferences will make a difference in the situation, or do you think that, is it your personal opinion that we are probably going to see escalating violence, even though there's some more talk happening?
In these situations, if the government increase the violence, it's worth for them.
Okay.
If they let us express ourselves, it's good for us. So it's simple. The more we raise the awareness about what is happening, the less violence we will see. Ukraine increased so much because we didn't turn back to watch Ukraine at the right moment. And we let the leader of the regime at that moment use violence freely. When the planet turns and watch Ukraine closely, they need to stop. So, or they let us protest and execute our rights and that are granted in the Constitution, and we can like deal with that, or they still going against criminalizing opposition or crimes of for your ideas, and the violence will increase. That's normal. You cannot control that. It's not someone that a leader like Capriles or Leopoldo or anyone can say, people, don't protest. When people get done with something, they go to the street. So the opposition are the best helper of the government right now. Because the more you try to canalize that rage, the more you try to organize that, the more the country can survive. And I'm not saying alliance in a strict sense. I'm saying as a figure of speech to explain that the government is there today because the opposition is trying to control the situation in a good way, that maybe there is some point that we can live peacefully, but you need to do certain things. Free political
speech.
Right. People are incarcerated, free the kids, don't prosecute, criminalize opposition, allow media to report neutrally, okay.
How about allow independent media within the country?
Media within the
like
country,
Venezuelan independent media.
Yeah, like that. That's very difficult to do because that's all against the model.
Well, we've got time for one more question. And my question is, where did it all go? Venezuela has been exporting millions of barrels of oil at top dollar prices for the last decade and a half, basically. Where did this pipeline of oil money disappear to?
Okay, this is ironic. We spend only in Cuba $12 billion a year. A year.
That's a substantial amount of money.
That money doesn't arrive to the people, too. They take our oil and they sell it back. And we don't know where that money is anymore. We have narco cartels money floating from Venezuela to other countries, too, because our country became like a free land to narco cartels, too. We are also that. And then we have the most inefficient programs rerunning. For example, the government launched a program to do housing. You know how many times they launched the program? 25 times. Do you know how many houses they did with those programs? None. Do you know how many commissions they did to stop insecurity? Like 32. And
they commissioned 32 panels to discuss insecurity.
They give you nomination, they give you the space, they do everything, and nothing happened. So what we have is people that are incapable of ruling. It's not because they were bus drivers. It's not against that they supposedly won the elections or they had majority. That majority that they have in April last time, assume that they have it for a second, they don't have it right now. 87% of the Venezuelans are against the regime and their policies.
Well, I think that it's a volatile situation, and
Yes, it is.
unfortunately, it's being driven very much by the scarcity of the basic necessities of life. In Venezuela, the national dish is the arepa, and without corn flour, you can't make one.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the staple food on every table in Venezuela. And I can't express enough to think about the country that used to be famous for spending the most per capita on beauty supplies to now be unable to stock even toilet paper, to have beauty
Or
queens
milk.
or milk or many other things, I'm sure.
Or insulin.
Or insulin.
Or radioactive material for cancer treatment. I can make a list. People are dying because they don't have the things they need to the medical treatment. By the way, it is real that the heroes of this fight in Venezuela right now are the students. They are the heroes, and there is no one behind backing them. And yes, they were to some, those programs that NDI has. That doesn't mean that they were trained to plot against the government. Anyone can check online what these seminars are about organization, about grassroots. That's normal. That's called society, organized society. So anyone can go and get organized, and that's not plotting.
Well, thank you again, JJ, for joining us on the show. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Alyssa. And thank you for viewing our show. This is the Only in Miami show. This has been a special report. #VenezuelaSOS. We can continue the conversation. Tag your posts. #VenezuelaSOS. You can tweet at me at Grant Stern. That's at GrantStern, or contact me via Google+. You can find the Only in Miami show at www.onlyinmiamishow.com. Within the next hour, we will have the video cast loaded into www.onlyinmiamishow.com. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., there will be an excerpted rebroadcast of this program on 880 AM The Biz Radio, Miami's Bloomberg Network station. Again, that's www.880thebiz.com. My name is Grant Stern, and thank you again for joining us tonight. I hope that we've informed you about Venezuela.